Mexico is a narco-terrorist state.
These vicious narco-terrorists
use of military force against the cartels.
Republican calls to take military action against Mexico are getting louder as the campaign season has been heating up.
But we can't have a war with Mexico.
No, it's a war on cartels.
And their supporters are cheering like they are watching Narcos. Ron DeSantis wants to destroy fentanyl labs and disrupt cartel operations with drones and commando raids. He's talking about leaving the bad guys stone cold dead.
Did you say you'd use drones on the Mexican drug cartels?
I said I would use whatever force we need to defend the country.
But there's only one problem, the one we face in the real world, not the movies. That's because this is beyond the capabilities of any military, inside or outside of Mexico. The problem, at its core, is economic, and it must be solved on those terms. Corn is Mexico's staple crop. In the 1990s, roughly 4 in 10 agricultural workers made less than the minimum wage, equivalent to about $1.40 an hour in 2023 dollars. Farmers could sell the corn on average at about $450 per ton in today's dollars. And today, most farmers only grow about 2 tons per acre. These are not exactly numbers that are easy to make a living off of. Corn growers, just under a third of the total number of agricultural workers, were near the bottom of that pile. Then Nafta came about, and over the next 15 years, Mexican tariffs on corn imported from the US came down to zero. Government subsidies were withdrawn, and the price of corn crashed by over 50% over the ensuing decade, in real terms. And what did farmers do? Many switched to more promising crops like cannabis and opium. NAFTA's impact on Mexican corn isn't, of course, the only thing that drove Mexico to become a big drug exporting powerhouse. The so-called China shock that pummeled US manufacturing workers over the last quarter century or so also edged Mexican manufacturers out of the US market, encouraging Mexican workers into other, sometimes illicit occupations. At every turn, Mexico's narcotic economy has evolved to meet the demands of the American drug consumer, starting with marijuana in the 1970s. And when US states started legalizing marijuana, cartels shifted to other drugs, like the surge of methamphetamine production coming into California. Heroin, and especially fentanyl, have been growing in popularity in the United States. The rising use of opioids is shifting the narcotics market, forcing the cartels to reorganize and adapt. In 2010, the reformulation of OxyContin, which made it harder to crush and dissolve the pills to release the active agent oxycodone, encouraged users in the US to shift to heroin, the illegal substitute. Heroin prices in the US increased, as did production of the drug in Mexico. Now the force of consumer demand is pushing in the opposite direction. Americans' embrace of fentanyl has clobbered demand for heroin. These shifts in the drug markets may make it easier to offer alternatives to the Mexican farmers and the marginalized young men who make up the lower ranks of the cartels in Mexico. This can come in the form of subsidies for alternative crops, urban employment programs, or new legal avenues, like, say, growing opium for the pharmaceutical industry. When I asked Omar Garcia Ponce, a political scientist at George Washington University, about what to do, he said, once criminal organizations become established, it's impossible to get them out. So sending the military into Mexico will not help. Question is, what will? Americans are understandably frustrated with the endless struggle against illicit drugs. The human toll of fentanyl, in particular, on American families and communities has been devastating. So ultimately the problem is this. The United States is trying to end the illegal drug market by attacking supply, when in fact the illegal drug market has always been powered by demand. This has been true even when the drug in question was alcohol, and it's certainly been true when it's been marijuana, cocaine, opium, fentanyl, and crystal meth. The problem is there is a market, and that market will be served. So, if this market indeed exists, perhaps the best alternative is to try to make sure that this market is not deadly, to ensure that the people that consume drugs are not killed by them, to ensure that the traffic in this drug does not lead to enormous paroxysms of violence, both in the United States and south of the border. Harm reduction strategies have been tried in other parts of the world, mainly in Western European countries. They focus on making sure that users of heroin, for instance, have clean needles that they can use in relatively safe spaces. The ultimate purpose is to make sure that drug consumption is as safe as possible. But there are no easy solutions, so we shouldn't pretend there are. All this talk about bombing the Mexican cartels belongs in Hollywood, not in Washington.